My son wore noise-canceling headphones to his birthday dinner. He wasn't hurting anyone, just humming softly to himself, smiling at the candlelit cake in front of him. But the waitress took one look, laughed, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "We don't serve kids like that here." I froze. My son looked down, confused. And in that moment, something in me snapped. Not from anger, but from the quiet fury of a mother who's had enough of the world mocking her child. What happened next made national headlines. If you've ever watched someone mistreat your child and felt powerless, or if you believe every kid deserves dignity, this story is for you. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more true family revenge stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters more than you think. My name is Lisa Turner. I'm 39, a single mother, and a full-time attorney living in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. My days are often filled with legal briefs, client calls, and the endless balancing act between motherhood and courtrooms. But none of that compares to the challenge, or the honor, of raising my son, Jonah. Jonah is 9. He was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at age 3. He's verbal, joyful, and endlessly curious, but the world doesn't always return his warmth. He struggles with loud sounds, bright lights, and sudden changes. That's why, wherever we go, he wears his noise-canceling headphones, sleek, sky blue ones he chose himself. They help him feel safe. They help him enjoy being out in the world, just like any other kid. I never planned on being a mother. Jonah wasn't exactly in my 5-year plan when I graduated law school, but life doesn't always come wrapped in neat little boxes. His father left when Jonah was 2. He said it was too much for him, that he didn't sign up for raising a special needs kid. That day, I packed his things and changed the locks. Since then, it's just been me and Jonah. I work hard to give him a life filled with dignity, celebration, and as much normalcy as I can. He's not a burden, he's my heart outside my body. That's why I wanted to do something special for his 9th birthday. He loves spaghetti and garlic bread, so I made a reservation at a trendy Italian bistro that had just opened downtown. It was all over the local food blogs, wood-fired pizzas, twinkle lights, and a family-friendly vibe. I thought, why not? A nice dinner, a little candle on a slice of tiramisu, just the two of us. A birthday he would remember. The day arrived. I left work early, picked up Jonah from his occupational therapy session, and we both dressed up. He wore the little gray blazer my mother gave him last Christmas. I wore heels for the first time in months. Jonah looked up at me in the mirror and whispered, "You look like a TV lawyer." I laughed so hard I had to fix my eyeliner. We arrived at the restaurant right on time. The hostess smiled politely and led us to a corner table. Jonah, as always, wore his headphones. He chose blue tonight to match his jacket. He was humming quietly, something he does when he's excited but trying to regulate. His fingers tapped against the wood of the table in a soft rhythm. To me, it was the sound of peace. Our waitress came over, a woman in her early 20s with red lipstick and a visible air of impatience. I noticed her glance at Jonah's headphones and the way her eyebrows lifted in that almost invisible judgmental twitch. I brushed it off. I've seen it before. She handed me one menu. Just one. Then she looked at Jonah and said, "Is he gonna be okay ordering?" I smiled politely and replied, "I'll order for him. He's sensitive to noise, but he understands everything." She gave a tight, patronizing smile and said, "Right, got it." Jonah didn't even notice. He was studying the flickering candle in the center of the table like it was magic. He whispered, "Fire dances," and I leaned in and said, "It does, baby." I was already feeling uneasy, but I told myself to let it go. Maybe I was just tired from work. Maybe she wasn't being rude. Maybe I was overprotective. These are the things mothers tell themselves all the time, especially when the world keeps demanding they make their children smaller, quieter, easier. I looked at Jonah, happy and calm, and I decided to stay. He asked if he could have spaghetti and meatballs. I ordered a margarita pizza for myself. Everything seemed fine. Until it wasn't. As we waited for our food, Jonah continued humming softly. He traced the edge of his plate with one finger. The table behind us grew louder. People laughing, clinking glasses, shouting across the table. Jonah shifted in his seat and pulled his headphones tighter. The waitress passed by again. She stopped, looked at Jonah, and said under her breath, but loud enough that I heard, "Ugh, freaking weird kid." I blinked. Did she just? She turned and walked off before I could even form words. I reached across the table, took Jonah's hand, and asked, "Do you want to go?" He shook his head. "It's my birthday." I nodded. He wanted to stay, and I wanted him to have this moment. A normal birthday, just dinner with his mom. But I had no idea how quickly this evening was about to unravel, and how far I'd have to go to make things right. It only took another 10 minutes for everything to fall apart. Our food hadn't arrived yet. Jonah was still humming quietly, his fingers now running along the condensation of his water glass. I was scrolling through photos on my phone, pictures from earlier that day when he opened his birthday card from my sister, when he built a Lego spaceship on the living room floor. His face in every photo, wide-eyed, focused, content. That was when the waitress came back, with no plates in her hands. She didn't look at me. She looked straight at Jonah. Then she sighed loudly, crossed her arms and said, "I'm sorry, but we're not going to be able to serve you tonight." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She repeated it, word for word, this time with a tone of forced sweetness, like she was trying to sound professional. "We're not going to be able to serve your table this evening." I stood up, instantly on alert. "Why not? What's the issue?" She looked at Jonah and said, "It's just, he's making other guests uncomfortable. One couple has already complained." She lowered her voice but made sure it still reached the nearby tables. "The noises, the headphones, it's a little disruptive." Jonah was staring at her, his hands frozen mid-motion. He didn't understand all of it, but he knew enough. His eyes widened, his bottom lip trembled. "He's a child," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "A child celebrating his birthday." "I understand," the waitress said, shrugging. "But this is a fine dining space. We're not a therapy center." My stomach dropped. My heart pounded in my chest as I looked around the restaurant. I saw the curious eyes from surrounding tables. Some looked uncomfortable. Others were just watching the drama unfold, like it was entertainment. That was the moment I realized something deeper, something colder. This wasn't just about one rude waitress. This was about a system of unspoken rules. A culture that hides its cruelty behind napkin folds and polite service voices. A society that tolerates children with disabilities, as long as they stay quiet, invisible, and never inconvenience anyone. And here we were. Inconvenient. Human. Real. "Are you the manager?" I asked. "No," she replied, clearly smug. "But I've worked here long enough to know when someone doesn't fit the vibe." Jonah had taken off his headphones. That's when I knew he was trying to make sense of everything. His shoulders were stiff, and he said in a whisper, "I didn't do anything bad." I turned to him, knelt beside his chair and took his hand. "You did absolutely nothing wrong, baby. You are perfect exactly how you are." Then I stood up, took my phone out of my purse and calmly said, "You might want to go get your manager, because I'm recording now." The waitress stepped back. "Ma'am." "Say that last part again," I said, holding my phone up, camera rolling. "The part about this not being a therapy center." Her face twisted. She turned and walked away fast, but not before I captured every word she'd already said, crystal clear. Jonah looked panicked. "Are we leaving?" I paused. "Yes, but not because of you." I flagged down the hostess, who looked nervous and confused. I asked for the manager. A man in his 40s finally arrived after a few minutes. I explained what had happened, showed him the video. His expression never changed. "We'll speak with the staff member," he said flatly. "But if you're choosing to leave, we understand." There was no apology. No empathy. Just management-level indifference. As we walked out of the restaurant, Jonah held my hand tightly. He was trying not to cry, but his eyes were glossy. "I just wanted spaghetti," he said, barely above a whisper. "I know, baby," I said. "We'll get you the best spaghetti in the city. I promise." We drove in silence for a few minutes, until I pulled into a small diner we loved on the edge of town. The owner, Ms. Dottie, greeted Jonah with a smile and a cupcake with a candle without me even asking. She didn't care about his headphones. She cared that he was happy. But I couldn't let it go. I couldn't shake the look on Jonah's face at that restaurant. The confusion, the hurt, the tiny crack in his joy. I knew that if I didn't do something, this would become just another story he'd have to carry. Another moment when the world told him he didn't belong. That night, after Jonah fell asleep, I sat in the kitchen with a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and replayed the video. And that's when the lawyer in me woke up. I didn't want just an apology. I wanted accountability. I pulled up the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. I reviewed Title III, which prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in places of public accommodation. Then I opened another tab, Local News Contacts, and another, Advocacy Groups for Autism and Neurodivergent Rights, and another, Yelp. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a mother with evidence, legal expertise, and fire in her bones. And I was done letting people like that waitress walk away without consequences. The next morning, I dropped Jonah off at school and drove straight to my office. But instead of diving into my usual pile of case files, I opened a blank legal pad and wrote one word in capital letters at the top. Accountability. That word meant everything now. I wasn't looking for revenge out of spite. I didn't want anyone fired out of sheer anger. What I wanted, what I needed, was to make sure what happened to Jonah never happened to another child like him. I wanted that restaurant to feel, truly and publicly, the consequences of humiliating a boy who just wanted birthday dinner and quiet spaghetti. I started by organizing my evidence. The video I'd recorded at the table was clear. The waitress's dismissive tone, her direct quote about not being a therapy center, and the moment she refused to serve us. The background chatter from customers gave the scene even more weight. It was real. It was raw. Next, I typed out a timeline of events, complete with timestamps from the video and details of what was said. Then I drafted a formal complaint under the Americans with Disabilities Act. As a lawyer, I knew exactly how to cite the statute. Title III, Section 36.201A, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability by public accommodations. I didn't stop there. I contacted the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, a national nonprofit that supports neurodivergent individuals. I explained the situation, provided the video, and offered to go public. Their response was immediate and supportive. They offered to circulate the video on their platforms and loop in their media contacts. Next, I reached out to a friend of mine, Julia, who worked for a local newspaper. She'd covered disability rights before and was always looking for stories that exposed injustice. I sent her the video, the legal complaint, and a short written statement explaining Jonah's experience. She called me 20 minutes later, almost breathless. "Lisa, this is devastating," she said. "Can I run this by my editor? It needs to be seen." "Yes," I said. "And use our names. I'm not hiding. Neither is Jonah." That night, the story was online. Mother claims local restaurant discriminated against autistic child on birthday. It wasn't sensationalized. It was honest. It included my quotes, Jonah's age, and a clip of the video, blurred to protect others in the background, but clear enough to hear every cruel word from the waitress. By the next morning, the post had been shared thousands of times. Parents from across the country commented with stories of their own, their children being excluded, dismissed, laughed at for stimming or wearing headphones or needing space. The story had struck a nerve, not just about disability, but about decency. I didn't stop there. I created a public petition demanding a formal apology from the restaurant and mandatory disability sensitivity training for their entire staff. Within hours, it had gathered 2,000 signatures. By the end of the day, it passed 10,000. People began leaving reviews on Yelp and Google, thoughtful ones, detailing the situation, linking to the article, expressing solidarity with families like mine. The restaurant's once shiny reputation was starting to tarnish, still not a word from them. No statement, no apology, just silence. But silence can be very loud when the internet is watching. That weekend, I received an email from a regional ADA compliance officer. They had received multiple reports about the incident and would be opening an investigation into the restaurant's practices. Meanwhile, Julia's article was picked up by national outlets. Autistic child denied service at upscale bistro. Mother turns personal discrimination into legal crusade. The headlines weren't just about Jonah anymore. They were about a bigger movement. People were listening. I hadn't even begun the legal process fully yet, but the tide was already shifting. Awareness was rising, pressure was building. And the restaurant? They were about to learn that underestimating a mother, especially one trained in the law, was their biggest mistake. By the start of the following week, the story had spread far beyond our small town. What started as a local incident had turned into a national conversation. My inbox was flooded, with reporters, autism advocates, fellow parents, even restaurant workers from other places sharing their own experiences of discrimination or change. The Yelp page for the bistro, once spotless, now read like a manifesto. Review after review condemned the establishment's treatment of Jonah. Some included screenshots of our video. Others referenced ADA law. A few were from former customers saying they would never return. By Wednesday, Yelp had flagged the page for unusual activity. By Thursday, they temporarily disabled reviews altogether. And still, the restaurant said nothing. No apology, no press statement, not even a vague social media post about learning and listening. Just silence. That silence spoke volumes, and it enraged people even more. The petition I launched had crossed 30,000 signatures. Julia wrote a second article. When silence becomes a statement, how one restaurant ignited a movement. Her editor called it the most read piece their paper had published that year. At home, Jonah remained blissfully unaware of the internet firestorm. I kept him protected from it. His life still revolved around school, Lego sets, piano practice, and the occasional whispered question like, "Will we try a different spaghetti place soon?" My heart broke every time he asked, not because of the restaurant, but because he was already learning that his presence could make people uncomfortable, and I wouldn't let that lesson stand. On Thursday evening, I got a call from a local TV station. They wanted me to appear live, along with a disability rights advocate, to discuss the wider implications of Jonah's story. I hesitated. I'm a lawyer, not a public speaker. But I agreed. That interview changed everything. The anchor opened with the video clip, my voice calm, the waitress's words unmistakable. Then she cut to me. I looked directly into the camera and said, "My son wore headphones so he could enjoy his birthday dinner. Instead, he was shamed, refused service, and treated like an inconvenience. We are not looking for pity. We are demanding respect." The segment aired during prime time. By morning, our story had been shared by major national outlets, ABC, NBC, and even online platforms like BuzzFeed and now this. That's when the restaurant finally reacted. But not with an apology. Instead, they posted a cold, one-paragraph statement on their website. We pride ourselves on providing a comfortable dining experience for all our guests. Recent allegations do not reflect our values, and we are reviewing our policies. No mention of Jonah, no acceptance of wrongdoing, just bland PR speak, clearly crafted by a lawyer too afraid to admit liability. The internet saw right through it. The post was met with outrage. People flooded their Facebook page. Local news ran a follow-up titled, "Restaurant's non-apology only fuels backlash." The comments were brutal, and deservedly so. Then, two former employees came forward anonymously. One of them wrote me directly, "Your experience doesn't surprise me. I used to work there. Management always discouraged serving people with behavioral issues, especially kids. It was an unspoken rule. I'm so sorry you and your son went through that." That message hit me hard. This wasn't just one bad waitress. This was a culture, a pattern, a built-in cruelty hiding behind napkins and menus. I added the message to my legal file. By Friday afternoon, I filed a formal civil complaint with the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. I had more than enough evidence: video, first-hand witness, documented silence, and now, corroboration from former staff. And still, people kept talking. That weekend, a popular parenting podcast featured the story. A disability rights group organized a peaceful protest outside the restaurant. Dozens of parents showed up, some holding signs that read, "Headphones are not a crime," and "All kids deserve birthday cake." The media called it the headphones movement. By Monday morning, the restaurant's reservations were down 80%. A local food critic posted an open letter withdrawing past praise. Their name, once associated with elite Italian cuisine, was now tangled with exclusion, arrogance, and shame. My plan had worked, but it wasn't over yet, because the real reckoning was just beginning. Watching that restaurant unravel wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. If you've ever had to fight for your child to simply exist in public, you understand. Don't forget to like, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more powerful true stories that hit where it hurts. The first sign that the restaurant was cracking came in the form of an email, this time not from an anonymous employee, but from their corporate attorney. It landed in my inbox on a Tuesday morning, marked urgent. The message was cautious, dressed in legalese, and full of vague attempts to smooth things over without admitting fault. They were open to dialogue, they said. They were concerned about the misunderstanding, and they would consider steps to ensure inclusivity moving forward. They also strongly suggested I remove the video from public platforms. I almost laughed out loud. They had ignored us, dismissed Jonah, gaslit the public with their weak statement, and now, they were ready to talk. Not because they were sorry, because they were bleeding. I responded in my most professional tone. "I appreciate your outreach. At this time, the video and content will remain public, as they reflect accurate first-hand documentation. I remain open to discussion, but not at the cost of silence." I signed off with my law firm's letterhead. That same day, I received a call from ADA compliance enforcement. Their investigation had advanced quickly due to the overwhelming number of formal complaints. They were preparing for an official site review, a government-mandated audit of the restaurant's practices, including staff training records, accessibility accommodations, and documented complaints. In legal terms, it was a quiet siren. This wasn't going away. While they prepared on their end, I got to work on mine. I compiled every digital trace of the restaurant's response, or lack thereof. Screenshots of social media comments they deleted. Time-stamped records of reviews that were flagged without cause. Even footage from protesters peacefully standing outside while management allegedly called the police, not for violence, but for loitering. I also reached out to a disability rights lawyer named Maya Densmore. She specialized in cases involving public accommodation and had gone toe-to-toe with corporate chains before. We met in a quiet coffee shop downtown. I laid out my folder, pressed play on the video, and told her Jonah's story. She looked at me across the table and said, "You don't just have a case, you have a moment. This isn't just about your son anymore. This is about every family who's been told to keep their kids quiet, hidden, or somewhere else." We agreed to collaborate. She would handle the civil components, and I would continue with the media and advocacy side. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. One of the restaurant's former assistant managers came forward publicly. She posted a video on TikTok confirming that upper management had long encouraged servers to politely discourage guests with disabilities, especially those who might ruin the ambiance. She even showed internal memos, guidelines that were discriminatory, but written in careful coded language. That blew the lid off everything. Her video racked up over 2 million views in 24 hours. Now, the story wasn't just about Jonah, it was about policy-level discrimination. The restaurant's owners tried to play defense. They posted a second statement, this time longer, naming Jonah and offering a tepid apology for any hurt caused. But it was too little, too late. Public sentiment had turned, and I was just days away from delivering the final blow. By the time Lisa's video hit 1 million views, she had already received more messages than she could count. Strangers thanked her for standing up, parents of autistic children shared their own horror stories, and former employees of the restaurant even came forward anonymously to describe a toxic work culture that had been brewing for years. Lisa knew this was no longer just about her son. It was about the dignity of all children who'd ever been made to feel less than because they were different. And then came the news story. The local news station aired a full segment on Lisa's experience, complete with her video, testimonials from advocacy groups, and even a brief interview with her, where she spoke not just as a mother, but as an attorney. "It's not about canceling," she said to the camera, her voice clear, unwavering. "It's about accountability. When a business humiliates a child with special needs, that's not a misunderstanding, that's discrimination, and it has no place in this community." The segment aired on a Thursday night. By Friday morning, the restaurant's social media accounts were in lockdown. Thousands of angry comments flooded their latest posts. Yelp was a battlefield. Some reviews were pulled for violating guidelines, but the damage had been done. Photos of Lisa's son from the video, blurry, unidentifiable but iconic in his blue headphones, became a quiet symbol for neurodiverse children everywhere. The restaurant's first move was denial. A vague post appears on their Instagram. "We respect all our patrons and are saddened by the misinformation being spread." That only made things worse. By Sunday, under mounting pressure, the restaurant owner appeared on a local podcast trying to downplay the event. "It's unfortunate," he said, "but our staff had safety concerns. You know how unpredictable some of these situations can be." The backlash to that was instant and ferocious. Disability rights activists called for a boycott. Even local celebrities chimed in, urging their followers not to support a business that used safety as an excuse for exclusion. But Lisa wasn't done yet. She drafted a legal memo outlining the violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, citing case precedents and attaching sworn affidavits from 3 other families who had similar experiences at that restaurant over the years. She sent it to the city's Human Rights Commission, the local press, and, most importantly, the restaurant's legal department. Then came the final blow. One morning, Lisa received a phone call from the city's licensing board. Her video had not only gone viral, it had triggered an audit. Health inspections, ADA compliance, employment practices, they were digging into everything. The following week, the restaurant closed temporarily for renovations. But the writing was on the wall. There were whispers of unpaid fines, ignored violations, and even a pending civil suit from another patron who claimed her service dog was denied entry months before. Lisa walked past the shuttered building one afternoon with her son, who was giggling quietly to himself, his blue headphones nestled around his ears. The windows were dark. The once bustling patio was empty. On the door, a paper sign fluttered in the wind. Closed until further notice. Lisa didn't smile. She didn't need to. This wasn't about revenge. It was about resolution. A quiet, powerful moment where the world tilted just slightly toward justice. And her son. He looked up at the empty building, then at her, and said softly, "No more mean people?" She knelt down, cupping his cheeks in her hands. "No more mean people, baby. Not if I can help it." They walked away, hand in hand. The city had taken notice. The system had responded. And Lisa had done exactly what she promised. She made sure her son's voice, though quiet, would never be ignored again. The weeks that followed the explosive exposé were a whirlwind. The story of the gala night meltdown spread like wildfire, not just in the local press, but through parenting blogs, autism advocacy circles, and even a few national outlets. Emily didn't chase the spotlight, but it found her anyway. People were outraged that a CEO could be so callous, so performative, and so cruel. Linda tried to push back with a carefully crafted PR statement, full of corporate jargon and non-apologies. "I deeply regret any offense that may have been taken." But it was too late. The video of her mocking Aiden was viral. The soundbite had become a meme. Parents were reposting it with captions like, "This is why we don't trust your inclusive branding." The board of directors had no choice but to act. Emily wasn't in the room when they made the decision, but she received the news with quiet satisfaction. Linda was out. Forced resignation. No golden parachute. No farewell statement. Just a clean severance from the empire she'd built on aesthetics and arrogance. The company scrambled to do damage control. They offered Emily a new position, a PR-friendly title meant to show they were listening. Vice President of Inclusive Strategy. She declined, politely, firmly. Instead, she handed in her resignation. It wasn't out of spite, it was clarity. Emily had realized she didn't want to fix a broken system from within anymore. She wanted to build something different, something better, something where her son would never be seen as a liability to be hidden, but a person worth celebrating. On her last day, she walked out of the office holding a single box of personal items. Her team gathered quietly, watching her with teary eyes. One young designer whispered, "Thank you for standing up. For all of us." At home, Aiden greeted her at the door with his usual bounce and a drawing clutched in his hand. "Look, Mama, it's us. And the mean lady is a puddle." Emily laughed, a real laugh this time, not the strained corporate smile she'd perfected. She knelt down beside him, taking in every crayon stroke. In the months that followed, she started consulting independently for brands that actually wanted to do better. Not for optics, but for people. Her first client was a startup founded by a mother of a nonverbal child. Together, they redesigned workspaces and product lines with accessibility and neurodiversity at the core, not tacked on as an afterthought. She also launched a small foundation in Aiden's name, funding scholarships for kids with autism who showed artistic promise. Aiden's own drawings were printed on greeting cards, the proceeds going directly into the fund. One afternoon, sitting in a sun-drenched kitchen, coffee in hand, she looked out at her son painting in the yard. He was humming to himself, utterly content. The world might never be kind to kids like him by default, but her world would be, and that mattered. In the weeks following Linda's downfall, Emily felt a strange, unfamiliar calm settle over her life. The emails stopped. The stress headaches that had once gripped her like a vice each night faded. For the first time in years, she slept without waking at 3 a.m., her mind no longer consumed by battles she had to fight. Aiden noticed it too. One morning, while they sat eating cereal before school, he looked at her and said, "Mom, your eyes look softer." Emily blinked, surprised by the observation. "Softer?" she asked. He shrugged with a small grin. You're not angry inside anymore. The words hit her like a wave. She hadn't realized just how deeply the pain and tension had etched themselves into her, visible not just to her, but to her son. Without Linda's manipulation poisoning her professional life, the office had begun to shift as well. HR quietly promoted another manager to fill the leadership vacuum. Productivity rose, and the fear-driven silence that had hung over meetings was replaced with a cautious sense of collaboration. Emily, no longer under scrutiny or sabotage, felt her confidence blossom again. But healing wasn't just professional, it was personal. One Saturday afternoon, Emily and Aiden went to the art museum, a place they'd both loved but hadn't visited in years. As they wandered through a photography exhibit, Aiden stopped in front of a stark black-and-white portrait of a lone tree standing in a snowfield. "That's what you looked like," he said. Emily tilted her head. "When?" "Back when you were working for her. Alone. Cold." She knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And what do I look like now?" He thought for a moment. "Like spring's coming." Tears stung her eyes, not from sadness, but from a kind of release she hadn't dared to imagine. Later that week, she wrote a long letter, not to Linda, not to her former colleagues, but to herself. She wrote down everything: the humiliation, the pain, the resolve, the revenge. She ended it with one line: "You did not break, even when they tried their hardest." She folded the letter and tucked it into the back of her journal, not to dwell on, but to remember, to honor. And in an act of quiet rebellion, she changed her phone's screensaver to a candid photo Aiden had taken of her laughing in the kitchen, a reminder of who she really was, beyond any title, paycheck, or cruel boss. The final ripple of her revenge came 1 month later. A former intern who'd witnessed Linda's worst behavior reached out to Emily with a simple message: "I'm applying to the leadership program. Just wanted you to know you inspired me. I saw how you stood up. Thank you." Emily smiled. The revenge had done its job, but the healing, that was hers to keep. In a world that often silences the quiet fighters, Emily had found her voice, not just for herself, but for her son. And in doing so, she proved something unshakable. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, unyielding, and sometimes it wears the face of a mother who simply refuses to back down.